Well, aren't you three a little lost? The economy cabin is that way, sweethearts. That single sentence, dripping with sarcasm and prejudice, was the spark that ignited a firestorm. It was aimed at two 8-year-old girls and their aunt, standing with valid, paid-for, first-class tickets. The flight attendant who uttered it thought she was protecting the sanctity of her cabin. What she didn't know was that the father of the two little girls she was humiliating didn't just fly on this airline. He owned it. Stay tuned to witness the moment a simple act of bigotry collided with a world of power, leading to a karmic explosion that reshaped an entire corporation. The air in Heathrow's Terminal 5 was a carefully filtered symphony of quiet efficiency. The scent of Jo Malone perfume drifted from the nearby boutique, mingling with the aroma of freshly ground coffee from the Pâtisserie Valérie stand. It was a world of muted announcements, gliding Rimowa suitcases, and the soft click-clack of expensive shoes on polished marble floors. For Patricia Wexler, senior flight attendant for Stellara Airlines, it was her kingdom. For 22 years, Patricia had walked these floors. She had started when Stellara was a plucky upstart, and she had risen with it, priding herself on embodying its motto, excellence in altitude. But lately, that excellence felt tarnished. She'd been passed over for purser twice in the last 3 years. Younger, less experienced crew members were getting the promotions, all smiles and performative enthusiasm. Patricia felt like a relic, her meticulous, old-school adherence to standards seen not as a virtue but as rigidity. Her resentment had simmered for months, curdling into a quiet bitterness that soured her interactions. She saw threats to her perceived standards everywhere. Today was Flight SA-77, the flagship route from London to New York JFK. The A380 was a jewel, and its first-class residence suites were the pinnacle of commercial air travel. Patricia stood at the door, her posture ramrod straight, her smile a thin, practiced line. She greeted the passengers with an expert eye, categorizing them in a single glance. The tech billionaire in the worn-out hoodie and Allbirds sneakers, the Russian oligarch's wife, shimmering in Cartier jewels and an icy demeanor, the aging rock star trying to look inconspicuous in oversized sunglasses. She knew their types. She managed them with a cool professionalism that bordered on disdain. Then she saw them. Walking down the jet bridge were three figures who, to Patricia's jaded eyes, immediately broke the pattern. A woman, black, probably in her late 30s, was holding the hands of two identical little girls, also black, who couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. The girls were adorable, with their hair in matching intricate braids, each adorned with a single white bead at the end. They wore identical, high-quality, navy blue tracksuits from a brand Patricia didn't recognize, and clean, white Nike sneakers. The woman with them, their Aunt Sarah, was dressed elegantly in a tailored blazer and trousers, holding a sleek leather tote bag. They were laughing about something, the girls' giggles echoing softly in the enclosed space. As they approached the aircraft door, Sarah held out 3 boarding passes. "Good afternoon," she said with a warm, genuine smile. "We're in 2A, 2C, and 2D. Patricia's practiced smile tightened into a barely perceptible smirk. She took the boarding passes but didn't look at them. Her eyes swept over the trio, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second too long on the girls' sneakers. "Well, aren't you three a little lost?" she said, her voice laced with a sickly, sweet condescension. "The economy cabin is that way, sweethearts." She pointed with a perfectly manicured finger toward the second jet bridge entrance, the one designated for the lower deck. Sarah's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "I'm sorry?" "Economy," Patricia repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Through that door, down the stairs. I'm sure you'll find your seats there." The two little girls, Maya and Mia, stopped giggling. They looked up at Patricia, then at their aunt, sensing the sudden chill in the air. Maya, the more outspoken of the two, tugged on her aunt's sleeve. "Auntie Sarah, our seats have the big TVs. Daddy showed us pictures." Patricia let out a short, sharp laugh that was entirely without humor. "Oh, did he now? How lovely. But these seats," she gestured vaguely into the hallowed first-class cabin, "are for our premier guests. I'm sure there's just been a misunderstanding with your booking." She finally glanced at the boarding passes in her hand, her thumb conveniently obscuring the seat numbers. See? Thorn. It says here you're in row 48. A lovely section. The view of the wing is quite something. She was lying, of course. The passes clearly said, first, 2A, 2C, 2D, but she held them in such a way that Sarah couldn't see. Sarah's expression hardened. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by a cool, steely resolve. My name is Sarah Jenkins. These are my nieces, Maya and Mia Thorne. Our tickets are for first class, seats 2A, 2C, and 2D. Please check them again. I have checked them, madam, Patricia said, her tone shifting from condescending to dismissive. And I have a full cabin of discerning passengers to board. I can't spend all day debating seating arrangements. Now, if you'll please proceed to the economy cabin, you're holding up the line. Behind them, a man in a crisp business suit, Mr. Henderson, shifted his briefcase impatiently. Is there a problem here? Patricia turned her brittle smile on him. No problem at all, sir. Just a small seating mix-up. We'll have it sorted in a moment. She turned back to Sarah. Last time, economy. Now. Sarah stood her ground. I will not be moving until you honor our tickets. My brother purchased these seats. They are confirmed. Look at them. She reached for the boarding passes, but Patricia pulled them back sharply. Ma'am, do you want me to call security? You are causing a disturbance. These children are probably tired. The best thing for them is to get to their seats and settle in. The mention of security was a low blow, designed to intimidate and humiliate. Several other first-class passengers were now peering out of their suites. Their curiosity piqued. The air crackled with tension. Mia, the quieter twin, hid behind her aunt's leg, her eyes welling up with tears. I want to go home, she whispered. Maya, however, crossed her little arms, her face a mask of indignation. You're a mean lady, she said, her voice small but clear. My daddy said we would have ice cream sundaes on the plane. Patricia's face flushed a deep, angry red. To be called out by a child in front of her passengers was the ultimate indignity. That is quite enough, she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I don't know what sort of scam you people are trying to pull, but it ends now. I am the senior attendant on this flight, and I am telling you that you are not welcome in this cabin. She turned and spoke to a younger flight attendant, a junior crew member named Chloe, who had been watching the exchange with wide, horrified eyes. Chloe, please escort these passengers to row 48 and inform the gate agent of the error. She practically spat the last word. Chloe looked from Patricia's furious face to Sarah's resolute one, and then to the tear-streaked face of little Mia. She was new and terrified of Patricia. But their passes, she began timidly. Now, Chloe, Patricia commanded. Defeated for the moment and not wanting to cause a bigger scene in front of the children, Sarah took a deep breath. She knelt to her nieces. Okay, my loves, it seems we're going to have a little adventure and see a different part of the plane first. But don't you worry, we will sort this out. She shot one last ice-cold glare at Patricia. This is not over, she said, her voice low and firm. Oh, I assure you, Patricia replied with a triumphant sneer, turning away to greet Mr. Henderson with a dazzling, false smile. It is. As Chloe led the dejected trio past the galley and toward the stairs leading to the sprawling economy section, Patricia felt a surge of satisfaction. She had protected her kingdom. She had enforced the standard. She had put things back in their proper order. It was a small victory, but in her increasingly frustrating world it felt monumental. She smoothed down her uniform, oblivious to the fact that she hadn't just made a mistake. She had detonated a bomb and was standing at ground zero, blissfully unaware of the coming shockwave. The contrast between the two worlds was jarring. They left behind the serene, spacious suites, the muted tones of beige and cream, the hushed whispers, and the scent of champagne. They descended a narrow staircase into the controlled chaos of the main deck. Here the air was thicker, filled with the cacophony of hundreds of people finding their seats, wrestling with overhead bins and the cries of tired babies. Chloe, the junior flight attendant, looked deeply apologetic. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Sarah once they were out of Patricia's earshot. She can be very difficult, Your boarding passes clearly showed first class. I know, Sarah said, her jaw tight. What's your name? Chloe, she replied. Thank you, Chloe. You've been kind. It's not your fault. Chloe led them down the long aisle to row 48. It was 3 seats crammed together by the window, right over the massive Rolls-Royce engine. The legroom was non-existent, and the seats felt thin and hard. As Sarah helped the girls into their seats and buckled them in, the humiliation washed over her anew. Mia pressed her face against the small scratched window, her earlier excitement completely gone. Maya just sat, staring blankly at the seat back in front of her, her arms still crossed. The ice cream sundae felt a million miles away. Auntie Sarah, Maya asked quietly, why did that lady hate us? The question, so simple and direct, pierced Sarah's heart. How could she explain the ugly complexities of prejudice to an 8-year-old? Oh, baby, she doesn't hate you, she said, stroking her hair. She's just having a very bad day, and she made a very big mistake. The flight took off. For the first hour, Sarah tried to distract the girls with movies and games on the tiny seatback screens, but their spirits were dampened. When the drink cart came around, she asked for 2 orange juices. The attendant serving them was rushed and harried, sloshing some of the juice on the tray table. It was a world away from the personalized, attentive service happening just a few feet above their heads. Sarah knew she couldn't let this stand. Her brother Marcus was a formidable man, but he was also a deeply private one. He abhorred conflict and public spectacle. However, he abhorred injustice more, and there was nothing in the world he was more fiercely protective of than his 2 daughters. He had been delayed at a last-minute urgent meeting in London regarding a potential merger, which was why he wasn't with them. He was scheduled to take the next flight out, just a few hours behind them. Once the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign switched off, Sarah noticed the icon for in-flight Wi-Fi. She pulled out her phone, paid the exorbitant fee for the premium package, and sent a single concise text message to her brother. Marcus, we have a serious problem on SA-77. Call me on WhatsApp when you can. The girls are fine, but they have been mistreated. The reply came less than 5 minutes later. Her phone buzzed. It was a call from him. She answered, keeping her voice low. Sarah, what's wrong? What happened? Marcus Thorne's voice was a deep baritone, usually calm and measured, but she could hear the sharp edge of concern. Sarah quickly recounted the entire incident, from Patricia's first sarcastic sentence to being forced into economy. She was factual and precise, detailing every word, every sneer, every humiliation. She told him the flight attendant's name was Patricia and the kinder one's name was Chloe. On the other end of the line, there was silence. For a moment, Sarah thought the call had dropped. Marcus, are you there? I'm here, he said finally. His voice had changed. The warmth and concern were gone, replaced by something far colder. It was a tone Sarah had heard only a few times in her life, usually in a boardroom right before a multi-million-dollar deal was ruthlessly dismantled. It was the sound of controlled, glacial fury. What is your seat number, Sarah? 48A, B, and C. Stay there. Do not engage with the crew any further. I will handle this. Put Maya on the phone. Sarah passed the phone to Maya. Hi, Daddy, she said, her voice small. Hey, my little star. Marcus's voice instantly softened, the ice melting away to be replaced by paternal warmth. How are you holding up? That lady was mean, Daddy. She lied. I know, sweetheart, and I am so sorry that happened to you. But I need you to be a brave little girl for me, okay? You and Mia. Auntie Sarah is there, and I am going to fix this. I promise you. I love you very much. I love you too, Daddy. Sarah took the phone back. Marcus, what are you going to do? Something I should have done a long time ago, he said, the cold fury returning to his voice. I have to go. I will see you in New York. The line went dead. In a conference room at the Canary Wharf headquarters of a major investment bank, Marcus Thorne stood up. The other executives in the room, men who managed billions of dollars, fell silent. He had just been finalizing the details of Stellara's acquisition of a smaller, regional airline, a deal worth nearly $1 billion. He looked at his chief operating officer, who was in the meeting with him. David, he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight. The deal is on hold. We have an internal emergency. Get me Captain Harrison on flight SA-77 on a satellite line. Now, then get me Evelyn Reed. Evelyn Reed was Stellara Airlines' formidable chief of in-flight services. Her number was not one you called lightly. As David scrambled to make the calls, Marcus walked to the window, looking out over the gray London skyline, but seeing nothing. He was a self-made man who had built his empire from the ground up. He'd bought a controlling interest in the struggling Stellara Airlines 5 years ago, attracted by its history and potential. He had poured hundreds of millions into it, transforming it into the luxury brand it was today. He was the majority shareholder and the chairman of the board. He didn't just fly on the airline, he was the airline. And one of his employees had just told his children they didn't belong. A few minutes later, David handed him a satellite phone. Captain Harrison is on the line, sir. Up in the cockpit of SA-77, Captain Alistair Harrison was enjoying a cup of tea when the communication from the ground came through. He was told the chairman himself was on the line. He nearly choked on his tea. In his 30 years of flying, he had never received a direct call from the chairman mid-flight. Mr. Thorne, this is Captain Harrison. Is everything all right, sir? No, Captain, it is not. Marcus's voice was calm and dangerously clear. I believe we have a seating discrepancy. I have my sister and my 2 daughters on your flight. Their names are Sarah Jenkins and Maya and Mia Thorne. Their boarding passes are for seats 2A, 2C, and 2D. Can you confirm where they are currently seated? There was a pause as the captain processed this. One moment, sir. He buzzed the cabin. Purser, to the flight deck, immediately. The purser, a man named Graham, arrived moments later. Captain, you called? Graham, do you have a passenger list? I need you to find the location of Sarah Jenkins and Maya and Mia Thorne. Graham typed the names into his tablet. His brow furrowed. That's odd, sir. They're ticketed for first, but the log shows them as seated in 48A, B, and C. Captain Harrison's blood ran cold. He looked at the satellite phone in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. Mr. Thorne, they appear to be in the main cabin, sir. The silence on the other end was heavy. Captain, Marcus finally said, I understand your senior flight attendant in first class is a Ms. Patricia Wexler. Is that correct? Yes, sir, that's correct. I want you to go back there personally, Captain. I want you to apologize to my family on behalf of the airline. I want you to move them to their ticketed seats immediately. Provide them with anything they desire. And I want you to inform Ms. Wexler that her actions have been noted. Tell her she is to continue her duties for the remainder of the flight, professionally and without incident. Tell her that I, Marcus Thorne, will be meeting the flight upon its arrival in New York. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Mr. Thorne, Captain Harrison said, his voice grim. He hung up the phone and looked at his first officer. You have the con, he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. I have to go deal with a Category 5 hurricane in the first-class cabin. As Captain Harrison made his way through the galley, he saw Patricia meticulously polishing silverware, a faint, self-satisfied smile on her face. Patricia, he said, his voice low and serious. She looked up, surprised to see the captain in the cabin. Captain, is everything all right? No, Patricia, nothing is all right, he said, walking past her and into the first-class cabin. He scanned the seats. 2A, 2C, and 2D were empty. He turned back to her. The 3 passengers, the woman and 2 children you moved to economy? Where are their boarding passes? Patricia's smile vanished. Captain, they were causing a scene. Their tickets were for economy. There was clearly a system glitch. Show me the passes, Patricia. His voice was iron. Reluctantly, she retrieved the 3 boarding passes from a pocket in her apron and handed them to him. He looked at them. First, 2A, 2C, 2D. He held them up for her to see. These seem perfectly clear to me, he said. Do you know who Marcus Thorne is, Patricia? She blanched. The chairman, she stammered. The chairman, Captain Harrison confirmed, his eyes boring into her. Maya and Mia Thorne are his daughters. Sarah Jenkins is his sister. He called me personally a few moments ago. From London. The color drained completely from Patricia Wexler's face. The polished silverware in her hand clattered to the floor. The blood roared in her ears. In that single, sickening moment, her entire world tilted on its axis and then shattered into a million pieces. The satisfaction she had felt, the triumph, the sense of order restored, it all curdled into pure, unadulterated terror. "Oh God," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God." "You will go with Graham, the purser," the captain commanded, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "You will escort my passengers back to this cabin. You will apologize. And then you will perform your duties for the rest of this flight as if your very life depends on it. Because in a professional sense, it probably does. Mr. Thorne will be meeting us at the gate in New York." Patricia could only nod, her body trembling uncontrollably. As she followed Graham down the stairs to the economy cabin, it felt like a descent into her own personal hell. The smug queen of the gilded cage was about to come face to face with the children she had wronged, and beyond them, the silent, looming judgment of the man who owned her entire world. The journey back up the narrow staircase from the main deck was not a walk. It was an ascent from purgatory. Each step Patricia Wexler took felt weighted with lead, a laborious climb towards a judgment she knew was waiting. The familiar, plush carpeting of the first-class cabin, which she had so fiercely protected, now seemed alien and hostile. The subtle, expensive scent of the cabin's signature fragrance, a blend of white tea and fig, caught in her throat, thick and cloying like the stench of her own failure. Her mind, usually a fortress of order and procedure, was a chaotic storm of panic. Phrases of apology formed and disintegrated, each one sounding more pathetic and hollow than the last. It was a misunderstanding. The system must have erred. I was under so much stress. The excuses were flimsy shields against the cannonball of truth that was hurtling toward her. Behind her, Graham the purser maintained a stoic silence, his face a perfect mask of professional neutrality that was somehow more damning than an open glare. And behind him walked Sarah Jenkins, her posture erect, her expression unreadable. She was not gloating. There was no hint of triumph in her eyes. Instead, there was a profound, sorrowful gravity. The look of someone whose worst assumptions about the world had been proven correct, and in front of her own beloved nieces. She held Maya's and Mia's hands tightly. The twins, for their part, were silent, their eyes wide with the bewildering whiplash of their experience. Just hours ago, this woman with the pale, terrified face had looked at them with contempt, casting them out like vagrants. Now she was leading them into the very sanctuary she had denied them, her body language that of a vanquished soldier. As they emerged into the hushed expanse of the first-class cabin, the scene was set like a royal court preparing to receive its sovereigns. Captain Alistair Harrison stood waiting, his uniform immaculate, his captain's hat held respectfully in his hands. He bypassed Patricia completely, his gaze fixed on Sarah and the children. "Ms. Jenkins," he began, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried the weight of his authority and his shame. "On behalf of every employee at Stellara Airlines, and as the commander of this aircraft, I offer you our most profound, unreserved, and sincere apologies. The treatment you and your nieces endured is not just a violation of our policies. It is a betrayal of our fundamental promise as a carrier and as human beings. It is inexcusable. There is no context, no excuse, that could ever justify it. Please," he gestured to the sprawling suites of 2A, 2C, and 2D, "allow us to escort you to your rightful seats and make the remainder of your journey as comfortable as we possibly can." Sarah gave a single sharp nod. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that." Then all eyes turned to Patricia. She stood frozen, a deer caught in the blinding headlights of her own catastrophic error. Graham gave her a subtle but firm nudge. This was her moment, her only moment, to grovel, to beg, to show some sliver of genuine remorse that might, if not save her job, at least preserve a shred of her dignity. She swallowed hard, the sound painfully loud in the quiet cabin. She focused on Sarah's face, avoiding the wide, questioning eyes of the children. I am so very sorry," she began, her voice a reedy, trembling whisper that was nothing like her usual crisp tone. "It was a terrible, terrible mistake, a complete misjudgment on my part. I don't know what I was thinking. I misread the situation entirely. She wanted to explain, to talk about the pressure, the long day, but she saw the warning in the captain's eyes, a silent command to stop digging her own grave. She ended lamely, "Please, forgive me." The apology hung in the air, thin and transparent. Sarah's gaze was like a pane of ice. She saw right through the pathetic performance to the desperate self-preservation at its core. It wasn't an apology for the prejudice. It was an apology for getting caught. Sarah offered no absolution, no comforting, "It's okay." She simply turned her back on Patricia, a dismissal more potent than any verbal rebuke, and began helping the girls get settled. Maya, ever resilient, immediately brightened at the sight of her suite. It was a private world of wonder. She found the remote control and gasped as her seat transformed, humming softly as it reclined into a 6-foot-long bed. She giggled, the sound a welcome crack in the icy tension. Mia, more hesitant, was coaxed out of her shell by Chloe, the junior attendant, who appeared with a genuine, heartfelt smile and presented her with a plush Stellara teddy bear wearing a tiny pilot's uniform. Mia hugged it tightly, a small measure of security in a confusing world. Captain Harrison gave Patricia one final, withering look of contempt, a look that said, "You have disgraced this uniform," before turning on his heel and returning to the flight deck. The invisible walls of Patricia's isolation slammed into place. She was now a ghost on her own flight. For the next 4 hours, she moved through the cabin, performing her duties with robotic stiffness. She topped up champagne flutes and offered warm nuts, her hands shaking so badly she nearly spilled a drink on a Belgian diplomat. The other first-class passengers, who had all witnessed the drama, now watched her with a morbid curiosity. Mr. Henderson, in particular, observed her with a cool, almost anthropological detachment. The whispers that had circulated about the disruptive passengers now morphed into hushed conversations about the disgraced flight attendant, conversations that would fall silent the moment she approached. The service directed at the Thorne family, meanwhile, was almost comically effusive. Graham the purser presented the girls ice cream sundaes with the reverence of a sommelier presenting a bottle of Chateau Petrus. "For you, Miss Mia, and for you, Miss Maya, I believe your father specified extra chocolate sauce and a double helping of sprinkles." Chloe fussed over their blankets and made sure their iPads were loaded with every Disney movie ever made. It was a desperate, frantic attempt to paper over a gaping wound with a thin veneer of luxury. Sarah accepted it all with a cool, polite grace that kept them at a careful distance, making it clear that while she appreciated their efforts, no amount of ice cream could erase the initial humiliation. As the coast of Long Island appeared in the windows below, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional, but with an undercurrent that made Patricia's blood run cold. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final descent into New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. On our arrival, we ask that you please remain in your seats until the seatbelt sign has been switched off and an announcement has been made. Ground personnel will need to board the aircraft first to attend to a procedural matter. We thank you for your cooperation." A procedural matter. Patricia felt a wave of dizziness. She gripped the side of a galley counter to steady herself. This was it, the final act. She knew with chilling certainty who that ground personnel would be. The landing was flawless, a gentle kiss of rubber on tarmac. But for Patricia, it felt like a fall from a great height. The A380, a majestic giant of the skies, taxied with agonizing slowness towards its gate at Terminal 7. The engines spooled down, their familiar roar fading into an oppressive silence. The fastened seatbelt sign pinged off, but no one moved. An eerie stillness settled over the entire aircraft, a collective holding of breath. Then came the solid, definitive thud of the jet bridge connecting to the fuselage. Patricia stood near the main door, her body rigid, her gaze locked on the handle. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing. The handle turned, the door swung inward. The first person to step on board was not a customs agent. It was Evelyn Reed, chief of in-flight services, her expression as hard as granite. Flanking her were 2 men in dark suits, Stellar as head of North American operations and a senior corporate lawyer. And then, stepping through the door behind them, was Marcus Thorne. He was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored charcoal suit, his tie loosened. He wasn't radiating anger. That would have been too simple, too common. He radiated a power so immense and so controlled, it seemed to suck the very air out of the cabin. His calm was more terrifying than any rage. His eyes, the color of dark, rich coffee, swept the cabin, bypassing the executives, the crew, and the curious passengers. They found his daughters. And in that instant, the titan of industry vanished. His face transformed, breaking into a smile so full of love and relief it was dazzling. "There are my stars," he said, his deep voice soft. Maya and Mia unbuckled themselves and launched into the aisle, running towards him with cries of, "Daddy!" He dropped to one knee, ignoring the crease in his expensive trousers, and caught them both in a fierce, protective embrace, burying his face in their braids. He held them for a long moment, simply breathing them in, reassuring himself they were okay. He listened to their breathless, overlapping stories about the flatbed in the movies, his expression one of pure, unadulterated fatherly love. He looked over their heads and met his sister's gaze, a silent look of immense gratitude and shared pain passing between them. Finally, he stood up, his daughters clinging to his hands. The smile faded. The Titan returned. His gaze swept the cabin once more and landed, with surgical precision, on Patricia Wexler. He began to walk toward her, his footsteps measured and deliberate on the carpet. The silence was so profound that his steps were the only sound. He stopped less than 2 feet from her. He said nothing, simply looking at her with a calm, analytical intensity that stripped her bare. He saw not a monster, but something he considered far worse, a petty tyrant given a sliver of authority who chose to use it to wound children. "Ms. Wexler," he finally said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a scalpel. "I founded Stellara on a simple promise. Not just luxury, not just service, but dignity. The promise that from the moment you step into our care, you are afforded a fundamental level of human respect. Today, you took that promise and you grotesquely twisted it into an instrument of personal prejudice." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But my brand, as important as it is to me, is not my primary concern here. My primary concern is that you looked at 2 little girls, my little girls, and you made a judgment based on the color of their skin. You didn't see 2 excited children on their way to see their father. You saw something you believed was out of place, something that didn't belong in your cabin. You used the uniform that I designed on the aircraft that I own to inflict a wound on my family that I, with all my resources, can never fully heal. You taught my daughters a lesson today, Ms. Wexler, a lesson about how cruel and small the world can be, and for that I will never ever forgive you." Tears streamed down Patricia's face. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry. He held up a hand and she fell silent. "No, your apologies are worthless to me. They are a self-serving balm for your own conscience. What I demand is not apology, but accountability." He turned his head slightly toward Evelyn Reed. "Evelyn, Ms. Wexler's employment is terminated, effective this second. She is to be escorted from this airport. Her credentials are to be revoked. She is not to set foot on Stellara property ever again." "Yes, Mr. Thorne," Evelyn said crisply. 2 airport security officers, who had been waiting discreetly on the jet bridge, stepped forward. As they moved to flank her, Patricia's gaze darted desperately around the cabin. It was then that she saw him. Mr. Henderson, sitting in seat 3A, was holding his smartphone, pointed directly at her. The small red light of the recording function was on. His expression wasn't angry or triumphant. It was one of cold, detached documentation. The final, horrifying realization crashed down on her. This wasn't just a firing. This wasn't an internal disciplinary matter. This was a public execution. Her humiliation wasn't contained within the metal tube of the aircraft. It had been captured, and it was about to be broadcast to the entire world. Her walk of shame off that plane was just the first step into a global firestorm of her own making. The fallout was not a storm. It was a concussion grenade detonating in the sealed chamber of Patricia Wexler's life. The shrapnel was public opinion, and it flew faster than the speed of light. Before she had even been formally dismissed, The digital world had already convicted and sentenced her. Mr. Henderson's meticulously detailed post from his first-class seat had become a viral phenomenon. He hadn't just posted a video, he had crafted a narrative, a compelling piece of citizen journalism that laid Patricia's prejudice bare. He quoted her sneering opening line, described the quiet dignity of Aunt Sarah, and captured the heart-wrenching image of the tearful twins being led away. He concluded with the satisfying, cinematic twist. The humiliated children were the daughters of the airline's owner. The story was too perfect, too potent, too karmic to be ignored. It had everything: injustice, innocence, power, and a spectacular, well-deserved comeuppance. Stellar Shame didn't just trend, it dominated the global conversation. For Patricia, the first 24 hours were a blur of escalating horror. Her formal dismissal took place not in a comfortable HR office, but in a cold, impersonal legal suite at a JFK airport hotel. Evelyn Reed sat opposite her at a long, polished table, flanked by two stone-faced corporate lawyers. There was no sympathy in Evelyn's eyes, only the glacial disappointment of a general whose soldier had betrayed the regiment. "Patricia, we have your signed statement from the investigation this morning, your confirmation of the events, and corroborating statements from Captain Harrison, Purser Graham, Flight Attendant Chloe, and at least 4 passengers, including one Mr. Henderson," Evelyn began, her voice as crisp and sterile as the room. "Your actions on Flight SA-70 were a catastrophic breach of company policy, aviation regulations regarding passenger rights, and frankly, basic human decency. As such, your employment with Stellar Airlines is terminated, effective immediately." Patricia felt the air leave her lungs. A part of her had held on to a sliver of hope that her 22 years of service, her previously spotless record, would count for something, that she might be suspended, reprimanded, sent for retraining. But termination? It was a death sentence. "Evelyn, please," she begged, her voice cracking. The professionalism she had prided herself on for 2 decades crumbled into dust. It was one mistake, a terrible, awful mistake, but just one. 22 years. Doesn't that mean anything? One of the lawyers slid a document across the table. "Your severance package is outlined here, Ms. Wexler. It is the minimum required by your contract. You will be paid for your accrued vacation days. Your health benefits will cease at the end of the month. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement as a condition of receiving this severance." "But my career, my life," she whispered, staring at the papers without seeing them. Evelyn Reed leaned forward slightly, her expression unyielding. "You should have thought of that before you decided to play God at 35,000 feet. You weren't protecting a standard, Patricia. You were indulging a prejudice. And you did it to the family of the one man who could hold you most accountable. This meeting is over." Being escorted out of the hotel felt like a dream. The flight back to London, in an economy seat on a rival airline, was torture. Every sympathetic glance from the crew felt like pity. Every whisper felt like a condemnation. When she finally arrived at her small, tidy house in a suburb of Reading, she found the nightmare had followed her home. A pack of journalists from the British tabloids was camped on the pavement. Cameras flashed as she fumbled for her keys. Their questions shouted like accusations. "Patricia, why do you hate children? Was it about race, Patricia? How does it feel to be the most hated woman in Britain?" She slammed the door shut, her heart hammering against her ribs, and collapsed against it. Her fortress had become her prison. The phone began to ring, an incessant, shrill torment. She unplugged it from the wall. She went online, hoping for... She didn't know what. Anonymity? A different version of the story? Instead, she found an inferno. Her face was everywhere, attached to headlines that screamed, "Sky-high bigot" and "first-class racist." Her Facebook page had been found, and photos of her on holiday, smiling with friends, were now public property, each one collecting thousands of comments dissecting her character and calling for her ruin. Her address, her age, her marital status, it was all there. She was no longer a person. She was a meme, a cautionary tale, a digital effigy to be burned. In her desperation, she sought an ally. She called her closest colleague, a fellow senior flight attendant named Susan, with whom she'd shared countless layovers and confidences. The phone rang 3 times before Susan picked up. "Hello? Susan, it's me," Patricia sobbed. "You won't believe what's happening. It's a nightmare." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Susan finally spoke, her voice was cold. "I saw the news, Patricia. I saw the video. Don't call me again." The line went dead. That rejection was the cruelest cut of all. It was the moment Patricia realized she was utterly alone. Broken and desperate to reclaim her own narrative, she made her final, fatal error. She agreed to a televised interview with a journalist known for his confrontational style, believing she could make people understand. She thought she could explain the pressure, the stress, the feeling of being left behind by a company she loved. On screen, she looked haggard and defeated. "I'm not a monster," she pleaded, twisting a handkerchief in her lap. "I have worked hard my entire life. I dedicated myself to that airline. But the standards have slipped. Things have changed. I saw people who didn't look the part, and I made an assumption. A wrong assumption, but it wasn't malicious. I'm the victim here too. My life has been destroyed by this cancel culture." The public backlash was instantaneous and merciless. By painting herself as the victim, she revealed a complete lack of remorse for the core of her offense. The interview didn't exonerate her, it immolated her. While Patricia's world was imploding, Marcus Thorne was building. He saw the incident as a profound and painful gift, a diagnostic tool that had revealed a cancer within his company. Firing Patricia was merely excising the most visible tumor. It did nothing to treat the underlying disease. He called an emergency meeting with his board of directors and senior executives. The room was thick with tension. The stock was in free fall, and the billion-dollar merger was on life support. "Our brand is toxic," his CFO stated flatly. "The financial impact of this is catastrophic. We need to release another statement, distance ourselves from her more forcefully," the head of PR suggested. Marcus listened patiently, his hands steepled in front of him. When they had finished, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "You're all looking at this as a problem to be managed, a fire to be put out. You are wrong. This is an opportunity to be seized. This is the moment we decide what kind of company we truly are." He then laid out his plan. When he announced his intention to ground the entire fleet for 24 hours, the room erupted. "That's insane," the CFO sputtered. "We're talking about a $100 million loss, minimum. We can't afford that." "We can't afford not to," Marcus countered, his voice like steel. "What is the cost of our soul? What is the price of our integrity? We will lose money for one day, but we will gain back the trust of our customers and the pride of our employees for the next decade. We will not just say we are different, we will prove it. We will stop every plane, on every runway in every country, and for one day our entire global family will focus on one thing and one thing only. Ensuring that what happened to my daughters can never happen to anyone's daughter or son again." His authority was absolute. His moral clarity was unassailable. The dissent died in the room. The day of reflection was a logistical masterpiece and a public relations coup. The sight of Stellara's entire fleet, motionless on tarmacs from Sydney to San Francisco, was a powerful visual. In hangars, conference rooms, and training centers, 50,000 employees engaged in the new intensive training. And when Marcus announced the $50 million Maya and Mia Future Flyers initiative, the narrative was completely transformed. Stellara wasn't just apologizing for a mistake, it was investing in a better future. The story was no longer about a racist flight attendant. It was about a visionary leader turning a moment of corporate shame into a beacon of corporate responsibility. The stock didn't just recover, it surged to an all-time high. The merger partner, deeply impressed, returned to the table. 2 years passed. The world moved on. Stellara Airlines, under the banner of the Thorne Promise, became the industry standard for customer service and corporate ethics. The Future Flyers initiative was a celebrated success. For Patricia, there was no recovery. There was only the long, slow grind of consequence. Her name change gave her anonymity, but not peace. She lived in a small, damp flat in a town she disliked, her days dictated by the roster at a discount supermarket. She, who had once patrolled the exclusive aisles of first class, now patrolled the sticky floors of aisle 5, restocking tins of baked beans. One gray Tuesday afternoon, a young black family came to her checkout. The father was telling a joke, the mother was laughing, and their daughter, a girl of about 10 with bright eyes and hair in 2 neat puffs, was giggling uncontrollably. They seemed to radiate a simple, unassailable joy. As Patricia mechanically scanned their items, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a child's comic book, the little girl caught her eye and gave her a wide, uncomplicated smile. In that moment, something flickered in the barren landscape of Patricia's soul, a pang of something that felt almost like warmth. She managed a small, hesitant smile in return, a phantom gesture from a life she no longer lived. The family paid, gathered their bags, and left, their laughter fading as they walked out into the rain. Patricia was left alone with the steady, monotonous beep of the scanner. The brief connection was gone, and the silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. She looked at her hands. Hands that had once offered glasses of Dom Perignon were now chapped from handling cardboard boxes. She hadn't just lost a job, a house, or a reputation. She had lost the possibility of joy. She had traded her future for a moment of petty, spiteful power. The hard karma hadn't just been a hit. It had been a quiet, complete, and irreversible erasure, leaving nothing behind but the hollow echo of a lesson she would spend the rest of her life learning. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a flight attendant getting fired. It was about the immense power of consequence. Patricia Wexler's single act of prejudice didn't just cost her a job. It cost her her entire identity and future. But on the flip side, it became a catalyst for something incredible. Marcus Thorne didn't just punish the offender, he used his power to overhaul his entire company and create genuine opportunities for others with the Maya and Mia Future Flyers initiative. This story is a stark reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, can create ripples we can't even imagine. It shows that while bigotry is a poison, leadership and a commitment to doing what's right can be the antidote. What do you think? Was the airline's response the right one? What would you have done in Marcus Thorne's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of justice and karma. Thank you for watching.